All right, so listen to this. We're going to dive into this legal case happening in Prague. And it involves this Czech citizen who went to fight in Ukraine. But get this, now he's facing some pretty serious accusations.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique situation. Basically, this guy, Philip Seaman, he's 27 years old. He fought with the Ukrainian army.
Oh, wow.
Without getting permission from the Czech government.
Oh, I see.
And he's also accused of looting.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So we've got some excerpts from this Czech newspaper. It's called Pravo.
Okay.
And they're covering the trial. And it's really interesting stuff.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go back to spring 2022. Russia was pulling out of Kyiv.
Right.
And Seaman had just joined this volunteer battalion. It's called Carpathian Sich. It's kind of like an independent paramilitary group fighting with the Ukrainian army.
Yeah.
Talk about a trial by fire, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, he gets thrown into basic training while there are battles happening just outside the city. And then as they kind of push into areas like Bucha and Irpin, Seaman claims he was just following orders when his unit started gathering valuables from abandoned homes and fallen soldiers. He's calling them spoils of war, but the prosecution's calling it looting.
Okay, hold on a sec. That spoils of war thing, I gotta ask about that. I get it, it's war, but isn't that kind of an outdated concept?
Yeah, you're right to question that. You know, the whole idea of spoils of war, it goes way back to like ancient times.
Right.
When conquering armies would just like plunder everything they could get their hands on. But, you know, the world has changed.
Right.
Modern international law has pretty much gotten rid of that whole free-for-all. These days, there are strict rules about what soldiers can and can't take during wartime.
Right, right. Okay, so back to Seaman. What exactly did he bring back to the Czech Republic that landed him in all this trouble?
Well, the list is pretty long. Includes things like gold bars, rings that he allegedly took off of dead soldiers, even a breathing mask from that massive Antonov An-225 Maria aircraft that was destroyed.
No kidding.
You know, the biggest plane in the world.
Yeah. Wow. A breathing mask. It makes you wonder what was going through his mind.
Yeah. And that's where things get kind of legally tricky.
Okay.
Because on top of those accusations about the looting, serving in a foreign military without your government's approval, that's a serious offense for a Czech citizen. Simon's looking at up to 5 years in prison just for that.
Wow.
If you add in the potential looting charges, that sentence could jump to somewhere between like 13 and 25 years.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that Seaman is appearing pretty confident in court, almost casual about the whole thing.
Yeah, he seems like nonchalant. He's claiming that his unit's commander basically gave them free rein to take whatever they could find.
Oh, really?
Their reasoning, according to Seaman, was that it was better for those items to remain in like Ukrainian hands rather than be taken by the Russians. But there's this one detail in the article that makes his whole following orders defense a little shaky.
Let me guess. It doesn't exactly paint Seaman in a good light.
Not really. It seems that he was actually beaten by some of his own guys in the Carpathian Sich battalion.
I'm kidding.
They accused him of stealing jewelry and berets from dead Ukrainian soldiers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Things got so bad that they actually detained Seaman and another Czech fighter in the basement of the Indian embassy building in Kyiv.
Wow, that's crazy. So what happened? Did his own battalion turn him over to the Ukrainian authorities?
Well, eventually they handed them over to the police.
Okay.
But the police decided not to file any charges and just let him go.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty crazy situation.
Yeah.
And it raises all sorts of questions about what's going on inside these volunteer battalions.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of environment leads to that level of mistrust and violence within a unit that's supposed to be fighting on the same side?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit unsettling to think about these guys like essentially policing themselves.
Yeah.
Especially with all these allegations of looting and violence floating around.
Right. And it gets even more disturbing when you consider Simon's own words, like what he actually said.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's in the article.
Okay.
He's talking about his unit's actions in Bucha.
Right.
You know, where all those terrible things happened.
Yeah.
And he says, we were the police. We were the court. We were the firing squad when it came down to it.
Oh, wow. That is chilling. It really makes you question their judgment, you know?
Yeah.
Whether they were operating within any kind of legal or ethical boundaries.
Exactly. And then when the judge pressed him on whether he actually, like, personally took part in any executions, Seaman decided to plead the fifth.
Oh, wow.
You know, he invoked his right to remain silent.
Not exactly a reassuring response.
No, not at all.
This whole situation just screams lack of accountability, you know? It feels like there's a real danger here with all these foreign fighters operating in a war zone with, like, very little oversight.
Yeah. You've hit on a really important point.
Yeah.
The article even mentions this group called Merc,
Okay.
which is specifically looking into the activities of foreign fighters in Ukraine. And they say that not a single person fighting on the Ukrainian side has been convicted of being a mercenary or of committing war crimes.
Okay. Hold on. What exactly does mercenary mean in this context? Like anyone who gets paid to fight in a foreign war?
Well, not quite. It's a bit more complicated than that. A mercenary is basically like a soldier of fortune.
Right.
They're mainly motivated by personal gain, often financial gain.
Okay.
They're not fighting for a specific country or ideology, but rather like whoever's paying them. And under international law, mercenaries, they don't get the same legal protections as regular soldiers.
I see. So this group, Merc, they're saying that despite all the talk about possible war crimes committed by foreign fighters on the Ukrainian side, nobody's actually been held accountable legally.
That's what they're claiming, yeah.
Wow.
And they point to a couple of examples to illustrate their point.
Okay.
One is this South Korean blogger. His name's Ri-kyun.
Okay.
He did get like a suspended sentence, but it wasn't for being a mercenary or for war crimes or anything like that.
Okay.
He was convicted of entering Ukraine illegally and for like fleeing the scene of a car accident.
Oh, I see. So he managed to avoid any serious legal trouble for his part in the fighting.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this other case, this Latvian fighter. His name's Kriste Ankas.
Okay.
And he admitted in an interview openly that he had taken like souvenirs from Russian soldiers.
Okay.
Including, and this is where it gets really messed up, a tank crewman's teeth.
Oh, my.
But like no charges were ever filed against him.
That's really disturbing. It feels like there's this like lack of consequences for these actions. Is this just the Ukrainian authorities turning a blind eye to the behavior of, you know, foreign fighters who were supporting their cause? Or is there something else going on here?
It's hard to say for sure, but the administrators of this, Merc, they're quoted in the article saying there are a lot of criminal elements among these foreign fighters in Ukraine. They even claim that some of them are like convicts who are using the war to like escape justice in their home countries.
God. That's a really disturbing thought. It just adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation.
Yeah.
But if Trakanazimik is right and there haven't been any convictions for war crimes, then what does that mean for Simon's case?
Right.
Could this be a turning point?
It's possible. Yeah. The head of the Prague prosecutor's office, he's stated publicly that, you know, some of these actions could be considered war crimes. So even though there haven't been any convictions yet, that doesn't mean it won't happen in the future.
I see. So maybe Simon's case will set a precedent, pave the way for like greater scrutiny of what foreign fighters are doing.
It's definitely something to watch. This trial could be like the tip of the iceberg, especially as more evidence comes out about the activities of foreign fighters in Ukraine.
Right. Okay, so we've got this incredibly complex web of legal and ethical issues, concerns about accountability, blurry motivations, all playing out against the backdrop of this brutal war.
Right.
I mean, what does it all mean? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think this whole case really shows the moral ambiguities of war. You know, on the one hand, you have people like Simon who are volunteering to fight for something they believe in.
Right.
And you have to respect that on some level. But on the other hand, there's a very real possibility for that righteous indignation to cross the line into something much darker. It makes it harder to tell the difference between a hero and an opportunist.
It feels like, you know, we've only just started to uncover all of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Simon's trial, I mean, whatever the outcome ends up being, it could signal like a change in how the international community sees the actions of these foreign fighters, you know?
It's like the world is finally starting to pay attention, realizing this isn't just some like isolated incident.
Exactly. And this case really highlights like how much we need clearer guidelines, you know, international guidelines and mechanisms for holding these foreign fighters accountable, no matter what side they're on.
Yeah.
Because, you know, things can get so blurry in war.
Right.
The lines between like, you know, legit combat and criminal behavior.
Yeah.
And we really see that happening in Simon's story.
Yeah, definitely given me a lot to think about. You know, we have this war in Ukraine that's attracting people from all over the world.
Right.
I mean, a lot of them are driven by this desire to help, but the potential for things to go south is huge.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes really important for us as global citizens to be aware of all this. You know?
Yeah.
We can't just accept like whatever narratives we're given, especially in a situation like this.
Right.
We have to think critically, challenge our own assumptions and try to see things from different perspectives.
So beyond just understanding the legal stuff in this case, what can we, the people listening, take away from all this?
Well, I think the big takeaway here is nuance.
Okay.
War is rarely black and white.
Right.
It's messy. It's morally ambiguous.
Yeah.
And it forces us to confront some pretty uncomfortable things about human nature.
It's so easy to just get caught up in, who's good and who's evil.
Yeah.
But the truth is always more complicated.
Exactly. And like we've seen in Simon's case, those shades of gray, they can have real serious consequences.
It makes you think, It's a reminder that even when you're fighting for what you think is right, justice and accountability can't be ignored.
Absolutely. And it forces us to ask ourselves some hard questions.
Yeah.
What are the limits?
Yeah.
What's acceptable in war? How do we make sure people are held responsible, even in all the chaos?
It's a lot to process, but these are important conversations to have. I mean, especially as this conflict continues and, probably as new ones pop up.
Yeah.
We can't just turn away from these uncomfortable truths.
Right.
It's our awareness, our willingness to engage with all of this that will hopefully help us build a better future, one that's more just, more peaceful.
It makes me wonder, what really drives these people to become foreign fighters?
Yeah.
Is it just about defending a cause? Or is there something more to it? Like, are they searching for something, some purpose in a world that feels so chaotic?
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's one that each listener can think about on their own. Simon's story, it's troubling, but it gives us a peek into this complex world.
Uh-huh.
It reminds us that even in the middle of war, the search for understanding, the search for truth, that can never stop.